Hi, can I ask you a question? When you're mid-flow, when you are in your presentation, when you're in your talk, maybe you're doing a podcast, maybe you're doing a live like this, where is the majority of your attention? I'm asking the question, where's the majority of your attention? Be really, really honest with yourself. Is it on you? Is it on the audience? Where is it? What's going on? Where's your focus? Now, when I ask this question of most people and they're really honest with themselves, they realise it's in the wrong place. So today I want to tell you about the attention triangle because it's an incredible way of helping you figure out how to get present to your audience. When I say I mean is mentally available and physically available to whatever is going on in the room. That's all presence is, right? It sounds very simple. Can be a little bit harder to get there sometimes, but the attention triangle is one of those things that really helps you. And it's an incredible model. It's really simple. There's two parts to it. I'm just going to talk about part one today because I think it's a really good foundation of where we need to begin to understand how we can be present to a room. Before I dive into the attention triangle, just in case we haven't met, hey, great to meet you. I'm Emma. I'm the founder of Speaking on Purpose. And I genuinely believe that having an authority talk, one that positions you as an authority and really gives insight to your audience, is the fastest way to grow your business. Because your authority talk, when it's done right, means you are memorable, you're sticky, you're referable, and it should drive your audience to doing some kind of action. From very, very low risk, low interaction like download your lead magnet through to a much higher kind of friction, which is work with me. But your business should be growing every time you speak. And if it isn't, then there's probably something that's just not working quite right in your talk. So if that sounds like something you'd be really interested in, DM me. I do have a space in June and I have one in July. Also, just to note, if we work together, if we can get your talk done before the end of July, that means you are going to be ready to go in the conference season of September, October, November. If you don't start until September, you're not going to finish till probably the end of October, which means you kind of missed this year, which means you won't really get out there using your talk until January 2027, which is kind of scary. So if generating more business through speaking is on your priority list for this year, then we probably should start speaking relatively soon. Right, now back to that attention triangle. So as I said, this model was generated in 385 BC. So it's pretty old, it's pretty robust, and honestly, I don't think I've seen a model that is as powerful as this one anywhere through any of the sort of newer speakers and writers around. So it was Aristotle, by the way, if anyone's wondering. So every time you speak, there is a three-way relationship that is going on. So let's start with you. So you are the speaker. So every time you speak, every time you talk about your subject, every time I do one of these lives, I slightly change the relationship that I have with my content. I'm like, that was a really good way to describe it, or actually that wasn't a great way to describe it, or oh, I can see a connection between this thing and this thing now. And so when you talk, things crystallize or become clearer to you, which means you can then articulate them more clearly to your audience, or your audience will have questions and it'll make you kind of think, yeah, right, yeah, that makes sense. I can see why you might think that, but actually it's this thing over here. So when you speak, you develop your relationship with the content, and that's really, really, really critical. Now, the second part of the triangle is the message, right? So that's essentially your content. So every time you use your content, it should change slightly because there's new and more interesting ways to say the things that you could say. There's new connections that get made. As I said, people will ask you questions. You're like, oh God, yeah, hang on. That's really important. That should be in the talk. I should reference that in the future. So your relationship with the message should absolutely change as you go through your talks. And it should iterate absolutely 100% if you're talking to slightly different audiences. In fact, I'm going to come back to that in a minute and I will talk about a client of mine. And then finally, there's also the audience. So They may know you. They might not know you. You may be completely new to each other. You may have a relationship with each other. They may know someone who's like you and therefore have an opinion of what you do or how you do it or your niche or whatever it might be. So the audience has a relationship with you, and the audience has a relationship with the message. They're pro the message, they're against the message, they're ambivalent towards the message, they don't want to be there, they feel like they've been held hostage in this scenario, whatever it might be. But they will have a relationship to the message. It might be that they've never heard anything like this before, and so they're completely new and naive to it. And maybe they've heard it 1,000 times and therefore are kind of slightly less open to it or slightly more skeptical. So they'll have a relationship to the message. Now, when you speak, what we want to have happen is the relationship between you and the message should move forward. The relationship that the audience has between itself and the message should change, should move forward, should evolve in some way. And the relationship between the audience and you should change. Hopefully, if you're doing it right, in a positive way. They will see you in a different light. And so you can see how this triangle is kind of an ever-evolving, hopefully always upward spiral towards creating a better and better and better experience for your audience every single time you talk, because that's what it should be. It should be an evolving process. A talk is never something that is once and done. You know, I have clients who come back to me and say, okay, right, I've done it 10 times now, and I'm finding this. Let's iterate that bit. Or this is a question that keeps coming up. We need to build that in. You know, it's not a once and done thing. It's an evolving, living, organic thing, because there's humans involved, which means it's always going to change. And obviously the environment around us is always changing as well. So those are the three kind of things that are always going on in every single talk. But what I want to focus on today is the attention. So when you are presenting, when you're talking, when you're doing your podcast, when you're doing your live, where is the majority of your attention? Is the majority of your attention on your message? Actually, the things that you have to say? Or is the majority of your attention on your audience and what they're doing and what's going on for them? Or is the majority of your attention on yourself? Unless you are a very experienced speaker, or you've had a lot of coaching, or you are someone who has performed before and understand what it means to be on a stage, whether that's, you know, standing on a carpet in front of 30 people, or you're actually on a stage and you're mic'd up and there's lights and the whole shebang, then most people, if they were being really, 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 really honest with themselves, the majority of their attention is going to be here. It's going to be on you. It's going to be thinking about how you might gesture. It's going to be thinking about, oh, I didn't mean to say that word. It's going to be thinking about, oh God, I wish I hadn't worn these shoes. It's going to be thinking, oh, that person at the front of the stage, oh my God, they're looking at their phone, I'm boring. Or, oh, I'm speeding up again and I said I wasn't going to do that this time. Or that story just didn't land, did it? I can see they're bored already. If we're really truthful with ourselves, and you know, this happens to me too on occasions, is we get caught up inside our own heads, inside our own narratives, and an awful lot of our attention, and I would say even with really, really good speakers, we're talking sort of 60 to 80% of our attention is probably on ourselves and what we're doing and how we are behaving. That's absolutely the wrong place for our attention to be. Because if we are really internally focused on ourselves, even if it's just a slightly, you know, bigger proportion at 60%, it's still more of our attention on us than on anything else. There are lots of things that are going to happen that are going to mean that your talk is going to be less likely to land with your audience. So brain-wise, you are far more likely to blank. You're far more likely to forget where you are. You're far more likely to miss out information. You are far more likely to get lost and not really kind of, you know, find it hard to get back to where you were, because your attention has gone internal. We just create noise inside our head. And so it's like trying to continue to have a conversation with somebody, to explain something to somebody, and the TV is on and the radio is on and 3 or 4 people are asking you questions all at the same time. You don't know where to direct your attention because there's just too much noise going on. And it's no wonder, right? Just imagine that scenario. It would be really hard for you to keep speaking if you've got all that noise going on. So when we have too much attention on ourselves, we're essentially doing that. We're turning on the radio and the TV, and we've got our friends around and they're all having a chat, and it's difficult to pay attention, right? It's difficult to know where we're going next because too much of our attention has gone inside our own heads. So that's what goes on in the mind. Body-wise, we get a tightening up, and it could be really subtle, it could be really dramatic. But the shoulders are likely to come up, the breath is likely to get shallow. As soon as your breath gets shallow, you've got less oxygen in your system, you can't think as clearly, more likely to get lost. And also your voice is going to become less powerful, less dramatic, less interesting to listen to. And you're going to have a lot less your ability to intentionally change it so it really lands with what you're saying is going to diminish. So brain and body start working against you when we have too much attention. When we've got too much attention based on attention has gone outside. Now I've got to refine myself. So when we've got too much attention focused on ourselves, we stop connecting with our audience. We also stop connecting with our message. So it's like we add a circuit breaker here and here. Actually, I should probably just rub it out, shouldn't I? That would be a better way to show you. We sort of end up with this circuit breaker that happens here and here. We're less connected to our audience and what's going on for them, and we are less connected to our message. Now, the other place that I see people over focus, so have too much attention, is here on the message. So this will often happen if somebody really wants to get it right and is really worried about the script and is really worried about getting all of the information that they wrote down or have in their slides. If you've got too much attention on that, it can go really wrong. So again, we get a little bit of a circuit breaker here and here because we start to lose connection with the audience because we're too focused on the message. So what I see as preventative measure, if you like, is overburdened slides that become basically part of a book. Great PDF, terrible slide deck. So we see too much going on in the slide deck. We also see, I'll see one of two things. So one is the eyes go a bit dead because somebody has literally memorized word for word what they need to say, and so they're kind of reading it inside their brain. The other thing is the message becomes stilted. It becomes a bit awkward. It doesn't feel like a conversation. It doesn't feel like somebody talking about the thing that they know really, really well. So the message gets a bit diluted, or it gets really awkward and clunky. That's probably the best way to describe it. So when we've got too much attention on the message, it stops being fluid, it stops being human. It also gets very data driven. That's the other preventative measure that I see. There's a lot of data in there to prove how good the message is. So it just becomes less alive, less focused on what the audience would really, really care about, more proving and less connecting. So when we've got too much attention here, those are the problems that we start to see arise. For most people, I would say most of their attention is going to be here, and then a smaller amount, but an important amount, is going to be here. So we end up being kind of on this side of the triangle. Now, the problem with being on that side of the triangle, obviously, as you can see and you can tell, is it misses out a very, very important part of the triangle, your audience. So if we're all over here, it's all about us. It's all about you. It's not anything about them. And the circuit breakers that have kind of jumped in are here and here. So your audience kind of gets left out. They're almost bystander in the whole process. They are not the focus of your talk. So they may be not the focus of the talk from a message perspective anymore. And they're certainly not the focus of the talk from a presence perspective, from a connecting with other human beings in the room perspective. So they are then going to not feel seen. They are not going to feel heard. They're going to feel like they're being talked at, rather than this is a conversation that they're having with you, even though you happen to be doing most of the talking. So the audience can feel really left out. And the minute the audience feel like they are being left out or they are being spoken at, they will mentally check out. They will start thinking about what's for dinner, or the fact that they need to reorganise a doctor's appointment, or get the car to the garage at first thing in the morning, or they've run out of cat food, or that email that they must reply to as soon as they get back to their desk. They are not thinking about you, and they are not thinking about your message. At this point, they're thinking about themselves. And so your ability to connect with them has completely changed. And it will be detrimental, particularly if you're a business owner, particularly if you are trying to provide insight, particularly if you are trying to move them along that know, like and trust pathway towards potentially working with you. Because this talk is like a mini experience of what it might be like to work with you. So we need to make sure that they feel this is what it might be like to work with Emma or Jane or whatever your name is, and it feels really good and they feel really seen in the process. So we need to really make sure that we don't stay on too much on this side of the triangle, and we do include our audience in the process. The other thing that happens is if we are too much on this side and not aware of our audience, is we don't react to our audience. We don't respond to what's going on. So if you are delivering something that is emotional or more complex or abstract, we need to be watching what is going on with our audience. Have they stayed with us? Do they still understand what we're saying? Is it resonating with them? Can I see people nodding? Can I people see shaking their heads? Can I see them leaning away and leaning back? Because if I can see what's going on in my audience, if I can see how they are responding, then I can follow what is going on in the audience, which means I can then react and speed up if I feel like they're getting a little bit restless, or I can slow down, or I can see if I've lost them and I can go, hang on, I've lost you. What's going on? There's something has happened here. I can sense it in the room, and you can then respond in the moment to what is going on. And it means you can adapt what happens next. But if my attention is only on myself and only on my message, I lose that opportunity. And I lose the opportunity to continue a meaningful conversation with my audience because I'm just in download mode. Does that make sense to you? Can you see how that is really, really important? They don't feel seen, and then you don't react to what's going on. And so the distance between you becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, what I'm describing here sounds quite dramatic, but that can be all of these things can be incredibly subtle as well. And the more experienced you are as a speaker, the better you are as a speaker, the more often you do this, the smaller these things are going to be, but they can still be there, and they can be really, really subtle. So if you're coming away from events, if you're coming away from speaking engagements and you get lots of nice applause or lots of lovely feedback, the question I would be asking you is like, what happens next? Do you get a trickle of inquiries? Is it a slow burn? Do you get loads of... What is going on after that? Because that's going to tell you where your attention was during your talk. Essentially, what we need to do is remove that line that goes between those three things. And we want to have our attention equally split. So we have got, or you have got, because I speak as well, we have got our attention equally split between our audience. So that when you're on stage, whatever that stage might look like, I have got 30% of my attention on myself. So I can be utterly intentional about the way that I use my body, about the narrative that it is telling my audience, about the stories that I might tell, about how I gesture, about how I change the cadence and the volume and the pitch of my voice, so that I can be really, really intentional. I'm deliberately going to move over here because I want to go back to this thing that I already described over here earlier in the talk, and it's utterly intentional. I want to move towards you and lower my voice a bit because this bit is a bit more personal, and I'm being utterly intentional about the way that I do that, because that's a powerful way to use my body, my breath, my voice on stage. And it's not that I'm manipulating the audience, it's because that's what fits with what I'm saying. Yeah? That's the truth behind what I'm saying. And equally, we need some attention on the message. You know your stuff. If I stuck you in a room with another expert in your area, you could speak about what you do unscripted, probably for days. If we gave you full rein, fed you regularly, you could talk and talk and talk and talk. You don't need a script. You do not need a script. You do not need a slide deck. You can talk. What might be missing is the trust in your expertise. And if that's the case, then probably go and watch the live that I did yesterday, day before, can't remember. I'll put the link down below. If that's the case, it's about trusting your own expertise because you do know your stuff. So we want the message to be your focus, your attention on the message. Again, about 30% of your attention is on the message so that you can stick with the message if it's the right message. You can adapt the message if it's what's needed. You can condense it. You can expand it. You can answer questions mid-presentation or mid-talk, or you can ask for questions to be at the end. But you know enough to know that you can adapt your message on the go. Not necessarily riff for half an hour without any structure at all. I wouldn't recommend that for any kind of authority talk because you do need some structure, and the structure is going to really help you move that audience towards taking action. But you should be able to adapt it in the middle of a conversation as well. And being able to flex like that really, really demonstrates your expertise. Far better than you saying, I'm very flexible and I can adapt to any situation. Actually demonstrate it, do it. And then it's a live demonstration of exactly how you behave as a coach or as a consultant or as a business owner. So 30% of your attention on your message, 30% of your attention on you, both utterly intentional. Then we want the remaining attention, almost, 40% on your audience. Literally looking at them, watching them, engaging with them, but in a really positive way. What we don't want here is focusing on the resistors. So the people in the room who, even if they had, absolutely empirical evidence, and it made no sense for them not to say yes to whatever it is that you're offering, they're likely to say no, right? You don't want to be working with those people anyway. But we don't want you focusing your attention on those. We want your attention to be on the people in the room who are already engaged with what you're saying and those who are warming up to what you're saying. Because those are the people who are going to be much more likely to move towards, down the road, the path, to saying yes to working with you. So that's where you want your attention. Is this landing with them? Really watching their faces, smiling with them, nodding with them. When you're asking rhetorical questions or when you're telling stories, see that then if they are nodding, right, they're with you, they understand, they're seeing themselves in your stories. They're answering the questions, the actual questions that you're putting out there, not just the rhetorical ones. Those are the people you want to be engaging with, moving towards them, smiling, nodding, because that's going to help them feel seen and heard as much as the content is going to help them feel seen and heard. Having a laugh, smiling with them, commiserating if they share problems with you in that space, if you've invited them to do so or not, even on occasions. So having your attention here as well is really important. So we really want as even a split as possible. Obviously, when you get to Q&A, all of your attention should be on your audience. Before you start speaking, all of your attention needs to be on you. The bit that is thinking about what's my intention for these people, what I really love to have happen for them by the time I finish speaking. That's the bit we want focused on the audience there. But in those moments just before you step on stage, really bringing your attention and intention into your body so that you step out in the most positive way possible. And obviously you can focus on the message entirely in the creation process, so that you're really happy with what it is that you've got to say. But in the moment of actually delivering the speech, this should be dynamic. This should be moving. This should be changing as you speak, but keeping roughly equally split attention on all of those areas. Because if you can do that for your audience, they will sense your presence. They will sense your ability, that you are grounded in what you're talking about. They'll sense your presence in terms of how here you are. Are you here in this room? Are you here with these people? They'll sense your presence in terms of your openness, your ability to answer questions and to move with what's going on in the room. And they'll sense your alertness, your sort of focus and attention on exactly what is going on in the room. So those are the elements that make up presence. So having that split attention is going to drive your presence, is going to drive your charisma really really quite high in the room, which is really, really powerful. So I would love for you to reflect on that question when you speak, whether that's on a podcast, whether that's in a pitch, whether that is in a live scenario, whether it's when you're delivering your version of an authority talk. Honestly, 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 hand on your heart, where is most of your attention? Is it mostly on you? Is it on the message? Is it on the audience? Is it split between all three? Because I would say at least 80 to 90% of the people that when I start working with them, their attention is all over this side with a little bit here and over here now and then. But the more we can balance out that triangle, the more present, the more available you're going to be, the faster you're going to grow your business every single time you speak. And we want to make sure that that's what's happening. Every time you speak, it is an opportunity to grow your business. So, as I said at the beginning of the video, if you are someone who already has a talk or has talks coming up and is really keen to develop an authority talk, one that positions you as the authority in your space, that helps give insight to your potential customers, that answers those unanswered questions, those objections that they might have to moving forward to working with somebody like you during the course of your talk, then we should definitely talk, especially if you want to be out there September, October, November this year, 2026, talking about your product, talking about your solution, talking about how you help people, because that is going to help really grow your business in the last quarter of this year and will mean 2027 is going to start in the most fantastic way possible for you. So DM me if that sounds interesting. I look forward to talking to you again soon. I will be back doing another live tomorrow where I'm going to talk about the roadmap. So take care. See you tomorrow. Bye for now.